Picture the scene. It is 5 a.m., your alarm goes off, and because you listened to a productivity guru last week, you actually don't hit snooze.
Right, you just force yourself up.
Exactly. You drag yourself out of bed, you immediately chug 16 ounces of lemon water, and you step into a freezing cold shower.
All to allegedly spike your dopamine, right?
Right.
Right.
And by 5:30, you are staring at a blank journal, trying to force out 3 things you are grateful for while simultaneously panicking about a 9 a.m. strategy meeting.
It is the perfect, optimized morning routine.
Or so we are told. Because you read 10 pages of a densely packed business book that you are barely absorbing. And yet by 8 a.m., as you finally sit down at your computer, you just feel this profound, hollow exhaustion.
You feel like a machine with a failing battery.
Yes, exactly. You are wondering why all this supposed self-investment is leaving you completely bankrupt. So if you have ever felt that specific modern brand of exhaustion, you are the exact person we are talking to today.
Because that scenario is really the defining paradox of modern hustle culture. I mean, we have turned the concept of self-improvement into this arms race against our own biology.
Which brings us to the actual material we are dissecting today. We're pulling apart a transcript from a program called the Learning English podcast, which is hosted by 2 individuals named Emma and John.
And I know what you might be thinking right now.
Yeah, an English language learning tool. Like, how does that solve my 5 a.m. existential dread?
It sounds like a stretch, I know.
But if you strip away the educational framing, what Emma and John have actually recorded is this stealthy, radical, philosophical manifesto.
It really is. It is a complete deconstruction of how we assign value to our time.
Yes, and the psychological traps of treating ourselves like projects, and the actual mechanical realities of what personal growth requires. Our mission today is to tear down that exhausting definition of self-improvement and extract their roadmap for quiet, resilient confidence.
And the deceptive simplicity of this source text is its greatest asset. I mean, when you aren't bracing yourself for a dense psychological lecture, you are just much more open to a fundamental paradigm shift.
That is so true. We are going to apply a rigorous analytical lens to their claims today.
Before we even get to their framework, let's consider the action you, the listener, are taking right now.
Oh, that is a great point.
By choosing to spend this time examining a new framework for living, rather than, grinding through emails or consuming algorithmic outrage, you are already stepping outside that optimization trap.
You are engaging in what the source material would call a compounding internal asset. Okay, let's unpack this, because Emma and John make a stark economic distinction right out of the gate.
They do, and it starts with how we define investment.
Right, because we naturally associate the word investment with 401ks, real estate, or venture capital.
Huh.
Emma points out that we readily invest in physical, visible upgrades.
Like a new phone, premium clothes, or home renovations.
Exactly. But she argues the most critical investments we make are completely invisible. Things like time, energy, and belief. She uses a very specific example that really hit me.
The one about scrolling versus learning?
Yes. She talks about spending 1 hour scrolling on your phone versus spending 1 hour learning. The scrolling hour just disappears, but the learning hour compounds.
What's fascinating here is where the friction lies. It is all about how the human brain processes reward, specifically regarding the delay of gratification.
Because we want it now.
Right. We are evolutionarily wired to prioritize immediate, tangible feedback. If you purchase a new jacket, you put it on, you look in the mirror, and the environment provides instant visual validation.
And boom, dopamine release.
Exactly. The action and the reward are inextricably linked in real time. But Emma and John are identifying something they call quiet investment.
Quiet investments. I love that phrase.
These are behaviors like reading, reflecting, or even deliberately resting, where the reward is completely decoupled from the action in terms of time.
I want to look at the economic reality of those actions, right? Think of the dopamine hit of buying that new phone or just doom scrolling for an hour. It is identical to buying a luxury car.
You sign the papers, you get the thrill.
Yeah, but the literal second you drive that car off the lot, it depreciates. Every single day you own it, it loses market value. Scrolling on a highly optimized algorithm operates on the exact same depreciating curve.
The hour is spent, the dopamine spikes, and then crashes.
And you emerge with a deficit. You usually feel cognitively drained and more anxious. Reading a challenging book or resting, however, is like putting money into a high-yield savings account. It operates like an index fund of the mind.
That assumes, however, that people have the capacity to recognize invisible equity.
Which is hard to do.
Very hard. The problem with the index fund of the mind is that it lacks a dashboard. Modern algorithmic productivity metrics have trained us to only value what can be quantified on a screen.
Like software tracking your keystrokes or a fitness app graphing your heart rate.
Right, the sheer gamification of everyday life. If an investment cannot be charted on a line graph moving up and to the right, modern corporate and social structures dismiss it as stagnant.
I struggle with this constantly. I really do. If I spend 45 minutes just sitting on my porch thinking through a problem without writing anything down, a massive part of my brain screams that I'm wasting time.
Because there is no tangible output to show for it.
Exactly. But the source text talks about the unseen courage of these quiet investments. John points out that the society only sees the withdrawal.
They see the finished book, the successful pitch, the sudden display of extreme resilience.
Right, but we are completely blind to the daily deposits.
And this blindness creates a pervasive social delusion. I mean, we scroll through a feed and see someone executing flawlessly.
And we assume it is just natural for them.
Precisely. Because we didn't witness the hundreds of hours of invisible compounding interest, the early mornings, the failures, the cognitive friction of learning, we assume their success is a baseline trait.
We compare our messy, behind-the-scenes reality to their polished withdrawal, and the resulting gap generates immense psychological distress.
Which perfectly explains why our attempts to close that gap usually result in spectacular burnout.
Yes, and this brings us to a story John tells in the transcript that I think every single person listening has lived through in one way or another. He describes a woman he met who every January would purchase a pristine new notebook.
We all know that notebook.
Oh, we've all bought that notebook. And she would fill it with massive, unyielding goals. She was going to wake up at 5 a.m., master 2 foreign languages simultaneously, drop a significant amount of weight, and launch a business.
All at the same time.
Right. And every single December, she would look at that notebook and feel a crushing sense of disappointment. But John diagnoses her problem not as a lack of discipline, but as a fundamental categorization error.
That is a crucial distinction.
He said she was treating herself like a project to finish instead of a person to understand.
We really need to analyze the historical architecture of that project mindset because it isn't accidental. It is a direct descendant of Taylorism.
Taylorism, like the factory floor stuff.
Exactly. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, Frederick Winslow Taylor pioneered scientific management. He stood on factory floors with a stopwatch, timing every micro movement of workers loading pig iron.
Trying to eliminate any wasted motion.
Right, to maximize output. He treated the human body as a mechanical project to be optimized. And over the last century, we have internalized Taylor's stopwatch.
We have taken the industrial framework of the factory floor and applied it to our own souls. But let me stop you right there because I have to push back a little.
Go ahead.
Because I have tried to abandon the stopwatch, and honestly, it was a disaster. When I first read this part of the transcript about not treating yourself like a project, my immediate reaction was panic.
You felt like you needed the structure.
Yeah, I thought, if I don't treat myself like a project with strict checklists, I will accomplish absolutely nothing. I mean, I have tried the whole intuitive living thing.
How did that work out?
Well, I tried intuitive resting, and I blew a massive deadline for a client because I didn't feel energized. I tried intuitive eating, and I'd stayed a family-sized bag of tortilla chips for dinner 3 nights in a row.
So the project checklist felt like safety.
Yes. The checklist, however aggressive, is a scaffolding that prevents total collapse. If we drop the rigid goals and just sit around trying to understand ourselves, doesn't that just risk stagnation? Isn't it just a very polite, therapeutic-sounding excuse to be lazy?
I see the appeal of the scaffolding, I really do. But consider the mechanical reality of what you are describing. You aren't describing a sustainable system.
What am I describing then?
You are describing an emergency constraint. The source text actually anticipates this exact pushback. John explains that the woman in his story didn't abandon action. She just changed a single verb in her vocabulary.
She replaced the word improve with the word nurture.
Exactly. And if you look at the behaviors the text associates with nurturing, they require immense discipline. They are highly active, not passive.
Like what?
Well, she started watering plants on her balcony, walking without her phone, and deliberately cooking a healthy meal once a week.
Okay, but those are tiny actions. How does walking without a phone compete with launching a business?
It is all about the metabolic cost of willpower. When you operate from a project mindset demanding you wake up at 5 a.m. to learn 2 languages, you are relying entirely on sheer willpower.
And neuroscience shows willpower is a rapidly depleting resource.
Right. You are constantly fighting your current reality to reach an idealized, fictional future state. That burns massive cognitive energy.
So what makes nurturing different?
Nurturing is environmental design. It is the active, deliberate construction of a baseline. You were using the project checklist as a whip because your baseline environment was chaotic.
Oh, wow. That hits hard.
The woman in the text stopped chasing an impossible ceiling and started building an unbreakable floor. She stopped demanding output and started tending to her capacity.
Tending to her capacity. That shifts the entire metric of success, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It means walking without your phone isn't a failure to hustle.
No, it is a strategic defense of your attention span.
It is lowering the cognitive load.
Precisely. The text notes that by making these small environmental shifts, her peace became visible. When you are trying to improve in the industrial sense, you are always measuring the deficit between where you are and a hallucinated finish line.
And that just generates chronic, low-grade cortisol release.
Exactly. Nurturing removes the finish line. It focuses entirely on providing the immediate biological and psychological inputs required to function in the present moment.
This shift from an industrial framework to a biological one sets up the most powerful metaphor in Emma and John's dialogue.
The garden metaphor.
Yes. If we are no longer construction projects with a punch list and a deadline, what are we? Emma suggests we view our lives as a garden moving through seasons. She states, very bluntly, a garden doesn't bloom because someone yells at it to grow faster.
Which is so simple.
It is simple, almost folksy on its face. But here's where it gets really interesting. Think about how absurd it is to imagine someone screaming at a patch of dirt to grow faster.
You would think they were unwell.
Exactly. Yet that is exactly the tone of our own internal monologues when we feel we are behind schedule in our own life.
It is true. We should contrast that simplicity against the sheer arrogance of modern algorithmic productivity. We accept that biological processes operate on immutable timelines.
You can't rush a tomato plant.
But we refuse to grant our own neurobiology that same grace. We attempt to bully our own psychology into blooming on a quarterly corporate schedule.
We absolutely do. I mean, if I am not feeling creative on a Tuesday at 2 p.m., I literally get angry at my own brain. I treat it like a defective hard drive.
And the text breaks this down by mapping our internal lives to the 4 seasons. Spring is the phase where ideas bloom and progress feels effortless.
Summer is the intense, high-energy maintenance of what you have built.
Autumn is the conscious uncoupling from habits or relationships that no longer serve you.
But the phase we need to dissect in extreme detail today is winter.
Yes. Winter is where the Taylor's productivity model entirely breaks down. In a project-based mindset, a period of slowness, lethargy, or lack of visible output is categorized as a system failure.
It is viewed as a breakdown that must be repaired immediately, usually with more caffeine or a new time-tracking app.
But the source material completely reframes this. Emma says, even when a seed is underground, it is still growing. You might not see change on the outside, but your mind is learning, healing, preparing for the next season.
So how do we translate that botanical metaphor into actual brain science? What is really happening in the dirt when we feel totally dormant?
Well, we can look directly at the default mode network, or DMN, in the human brain.
Okay, tell me about the DMN.
For decades, neuroscientists believed that when you weren't actively focused on a task, when you were just staring out a window, daydreaming, or feeling unmotivated, your brain was essentially powered down.
Like a computer in sleep mode.
Right. But in the early 2000s, fMRI studies revealed that when subjects let their minds wander, a massive, interconnected network of brain regions lit up like a Christmas tree.
Wait, really?
Yes, this is the DMN. And what is fascinating is that the DMN burns an immense amount of metabolic energy.
So doing nothing is actually physically exhausting work for the brain.
Exactly. When you are in a psychological winter, perhaps you are recovering from a major failure, grieving, or just profoundly burned out from a long summer of overperforming, your brain shifts resources to the default mode network.
What is it actually doing in there?
It is busy consolidating memories, processing complex emotions, running future simulations, and integrating your identity. It is literally doing the heavy lifting of figuring out who you are now that the environment has changed.
Oh, wow. So it's rewriting the software.
That requires massive metabolic fuel, which is why you feel tired. The lethargy isn't a failure. It is a strict biological boundary enforcing the necessary rest required for neuroplasticity.
I mean, try explaining the default mode network to a project manager who needs Q3 deliverables by Friday. It is incredibly difficult to defend your winter in a culture that only compensates you for summer.
It is difficult, absolutely. But the alternative is cognitive collapse. Chronic activation, forcing yourself to stay in an endless summer, leads to neurodegenerative burnout.
The text insists that good things need roots first.
And winter is the precise season where roots grow the strongest. If you deny the brain its winter, it cannot process the stress of the summer, and your eventual forced collapse will be far more destructive than a scheduled dormancy.
Okay, so if we are supposed to treat ourselves like a seasonal garden, giving ourselves permission to undergo these massive, unseen neurological shifts in the winter, we have to talk about maintenance.
What do you mean?
I mean, what are we using for water and sunlight? How do we actually tend to this system? The transcript pivots here to a discussion about self-care. And John takes direct aim at how we have completely commodified the concept.
He really does. Self-care has been utterly co-opted by the wellness industry. It has been reduced to a transaction.
John points out that modern self-care is usually visualized as purchasing relaxation, right? Like expensive candles, a bath bomb, a luxury spa retreat.
Yes, aesthetic self-care.
Let's apply an economic lens to this. Aesthetic self-care, the bath bomb or the massage, is the equivalent of renting a luxury hotel room for the night. You get temporary shelter from the elements.
For those 60 minutes, the stress of the world cannot touch you.
Right. But the moment you check out and walk back into the street, your underlying financial reality hasn't changed. You built zero equity. The world is exactly as stressful as you left it.
That is a brilliant way to frame it.
But Emma proposes a radically different definition. She says, learning is how you take care of your future self.
So if the back bomb is renting a hotel room,
learning is paying down the mortgage on the underlying equity of your own mind. You are acquiring a permanent asset. It's future-proofing.
that distinction between temporary relief and permanent equity is crucial. And Emma shares a very revealing anecdote to ground this.
The photography course, right?
Yes, she describes a period of intense personal uncertainty, a deep psychological winter where she felt totally adrift. And instead of retreating into pure escapism or trying to force a major career pivot, she signed up for an online photography course.
She makes it explicitly clear in the text. It was not to build a side hustle.
No, not at all.
It was not to enhance her resume. It was entirely for her.
Yeah.
But you know, if you are listening to this while commuting to a job you dislike, or maybe you are working 50 hours a week and dealing with 2 toddlers at home, you're probably rolling your eyes right now.
Thinking, must be nice to have the time for that.
Exactly. Must be nice to have the disposable income to take a 6-week masterclass just for the fun of it. Because when you are in survival mode, the idea of adding a curriculum to your plate sounds like torture, not self-care.
That is a highly rational skepticism. If learning means enrolling in a massive, time-consuming program, it just becomes another Taylorist project to fail at.
Right, another thing to feel guilty about not finishing.
But we have to scale down the mechanism of what Emma was actually doing. We have to look at the micro-application of curiosity. She admits she felt silly at first, but as she started looking through the camera lens, focusing on lighting and composition, she noted something incredible.
She said, "The world looked brighter because I was paying attention again."
Exactly.
So why does paying attention heal us? What is the actual mechanism there? Because we usually think of healing as requiring total rest or deep therapeutic analysis, not, trying to understand aperture settings on a camera.
It comes down to where the brain is directing its processing power. When you are trapped in anxiety, your amygdala is hyperactive and your focus is violently internal.
You are trapped in rumination.
Right. You are scanning your own past for mistakes and scanning the future for threats. It is an incredibly claustrophobic state.
It is exhausting.
But when you engage in learning driven by pure, low-stakes curiosity, even if it is just spending 5 minutes a day reading about a historical event or trying to identify the trees in your neighborhood, you force your brain to switch processing from internal threat detection to external observation.
Wow. So curiosity is an active directional force.
Yes, it physically pulls your cognitive resources out of the darkness of rumination and anchors them in the external world.
That makes so much sense. I mean, you cannot simultaneously agonize over a vague existential dread while trying to figure out how shutter speed works or trying to conjugate a verb in a new language.
You are essentially throwing a circuit breaker.
And John adds another layer to this. He says that when you learn, you are growing roots of self-trust.
Which goes back to the concept of permanent equity we talked about earlier. When you are stuck in a rut, you lose trust in your own agency, you feel like a passive victim of circumstance.
Right. Everything is just happening to you.
By deliberately engaging in a micro-practice of learning, you are generating daily, undeniable proof that your brain is still plastic. You are proving to yourself that you can still absorb, adapt, and manipulate new information.
It rebuilds the core belief that you are capable of navigating change. But absorbing new information is only half of the equation presented in the source text.
The other half is unlearning.
Yes, because sometimes the garden isn't just dormant, sometimes it is choked with weeds. Emma introduces this concept that I actually think is the most challenging part of this entire manifesto, the necessity of unlearning.
It is difficult, yes.
She states that true growth often requires letting go of what you were taught to believe about your own worth, especially if those lessons came from someone who made you feel small for not knowing enough.
Unlearning is significantly more metabolically expensive than learning.
Really? Why is that?
Because when you learn something new, you are forging a new neural pathway. But when you unlearn a deeply ingrained belief, like the belief that your worth is tied to your economic output or that admitting ignorance is a fatal weakness, you have to actively starve an existing, highly reinforced neural superhighway.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And society actively penalizes us for trying to unlearn the expert mindset.
Absolutely it does.
Think about the corporate environment. The entire structure of a modern career is built on the performance of certainty. If you are in a high-stakes strategy meeting and someone asks a complex question, the absolute worst thing you can say politically is, "I don't know."
We are terrified of ego death.
We construct these massive, fragile identities around being the person who has the answers. So what does this all mean for us?
Well, John attacks that fragile architecture directly. He presents a brilliant paradox. He says the most peaceful people are not the ones who know everything, they're the ones who keep learning.
It's so counterintuitive, but so true.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we can look at the Zen Buddhist concept of Shoshin, which translates to beginner's mind. Shunryu Suzuki famously wrote that in the beginner's mind there are many possibilities, but in the expert's mind there are few.
Because the expert's cup is already full. If you base your entire identity on being an unassailable authority, you live in constant terror of disruption.
Every new technology, every paradigm shift in your industry is a threat.
Every younger colleague with a fresh idea is an existential threat to your identity. You become rigid, defensive, and ultimately obsolete.
The irony is that the pursuit of absolute expertise, which is supposed to bring security, actually creates ultimate fragility. If your identity is, "I'm the foremost authority on X," a disruption to X destroys you.
But if you adopt Shoshin, if your core identity is, "I am a perpetual learner," you become anti-fragile.
Exactly. A massive industry disruption isn't a threat. It is simply new material to process. The beginner's mind drops the heavy armor of ego. It is the ultimate form of adaptability.
As John eloquently phrases it, feeling like you are still learning isn't a sign of weakness. It is a sign that you are alive. Let's pull all of these threads together because the architecture Emma and John have laid out is genuinely profound.
It really is a complete system.
We started with the exhausted 5 a.m. worker, treating themselves like a depreciating physical asset and a tailorist manufacturing project. The transcript demands we abandon that framework.
It demands we view our minds as compounding invisible assets.
And our lives as seasonal biological systems that require the dormancy of winter just as much as the visible output of summer.
And it redefines the very mechanism of how we maintain that system. It strips away the commercialized veneer of self-care and replaces it with the robust equity-building practice of curiosity and beginner's mind.
It asks us to dismantle the fragile ego of the expert and embrace the resilient peace of the eternal student. And, the homework the source material leaves us with is refreshingly small.
They don't ask for a new notebook filled with resolutions.
No, they ask you to do one single thing tomorrow to tend your inner home. It could be 5 minutes of unstructured journaling just to see what the default mode network kicks up.
Or it could be taking a walk and actively paying attention to the environment to break an anxiety loop.
Or most critically, it could just be the act of speaking kindly to yourself when you feel dormant. Because the core thesis of this entire document is this: you are not a project to complete. You are a living story, unfolding slowly.
As we conclude this analysis, I want to leave you with a final provocation that extends Emma and John's botanical metaphor. We have discussed the need for patience while the garden blooms and the necessity of unlearning the weeds of toxic societal expectations.
Right.
But consider the ecological reality of weeds for a moment. In organic gardening, certain plants that we quickly label as weeds are actually vital companion plants.
Wait, like what?
Dandelions, for instance. They have massive taproots that pull essential nutrients like calcium from deep underground up to the topsoil, preparing the earth for more delicate plants.
Oh, wow. Are you suggesting that the failures aren't just obstacles, but actual preparation mechanisms?
Exactly. What if the parts of your personal history that you currently view as useless weeds, the false starts, the embarrassing mistakes, the profound periods of winter dormancy where you felt you produced nothing of value, aren't actually weeds at all?
That is wild to think about.
What if those experiences were the exact companion plants required to dredge up the resilience, the humility, and the empathy you need for your current season? They aren't ruining the garden, they are telling you exactly what kind of soil you are working with.
That reframes every single past failure into compounding equity. Think about your own portfolio today. Think about your soil, keep learning, keep nurturing the baseline, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.
What if the reason you can't escape your burnout isn't because you aren't trying hard enough, but, well, because your grand fantasies of escaping your life are exactly what's trapping you in it?
Oof. Yeah, that is a heavy thought to start with.
Right. But welcome to the deep dive. We are looking at a space today that really defies easy measurement.
It totally does.
Because usually when we talk about a problem, there is this expectation of diagnostic precision.
Right, like a clear-cut answer.
Exactly. Like you break a bone, the x-ray shows a jagged white line, and the doctor points at the screen and gives you this localized fix.
Right, boom, 6 weeks in a cast. Done.
Yeah. But then you step into the world of personal exhaustion, of that quiet, creeping feeling that you were just entirely depleted, and suddenly all those diagnostic tools just fail us.
They do, because the damage isn't a snapped bone. It is an empty tank.
An empty tank. And for you listening right now, balancing a dozen different spinning plates, juggling responsibilities at work, managing relationships, caring for family. I mean, the mere concept of self-improvement probably sounds like a threat.
Oh, absolutely. It sounds like just another heavy obligation added to an endless to-do list.
It really does.
And I think it often gets translated in our exhausted brains as self-correction.
Oh, wow. Self-correction.
Yeah, because when you are operating in a landscape of total depletion, the suggestion that you need to improve, well, it feels punitive.
Like you're doing something wrong.
Exactly. It feels like an indictment, a really subtle way of being told you are not currently good enough or fast enough or productive enough.
Mm-hmm.
The whole phrase investing in yourself has been, it's been completely hijacked.
Hijacked by who?
By a culture that demands constant optimization, right? It turns what should be a restorative process into this really high-stakes performance.
A high-stakes performance. Which brings us to the core mission of today's deep dive. We are going to completely reframe this entire idea of self-investment.
Yes, we have to.
We are stripping away the pressure and those punitive models of growth. And our source material today provides a really incredible roadmap for doing exactly that.
It really does. It's quite profound.
Yeah, we're looking at a transcript from an episode of the Learning English podcast. It's hosted by a duo named Emma and John, and the episode is titled The Best Investment You'll Ever Make, Part 2.
Right.
And we are going to meticulously dissect Emma's personal story of overcoming this deep, invisible burnout. We'll analyze a profound architectural metaphor they build regarding an inner home.
Which is just a brilliant metaphor, by the way.
It really is. I can't wait to get into it. And most importantly, we will explore the actual mechanics of how tiny, almost microscopic choices can completely rewrite the trajectory of your life.
The most striking element of this source material right from the opening lines is its absolute rejection of the overnight change narrative.
Oh, yeah. Completely rejects it.
Because we live in a society obsessed with the cinematic montage sequence, right?
That's the training montage.
Exactly. That sudden dramatic transformation where someone wakes up at 4 a.m., drinks a perfectly blended green smoothie, and entirely reinvents their reality by Tuesday.
Which is so exhausting to even think about.
It is. And the focus of our analysis today subverts that entirely. We are looking at the power of the microscopic pivot.
The microscopic pivot, I like that.
It's really an exploration of how incredibly small shifts in your daily psychological baseline, like just tiny changes, yield massive differences in where you ultimately end up.
But, before we get to the mechanics of that pivot, we really need to understand the starting line.
Right. We have to define the problem.
Yeah, we have to define what inner bankruptcy actually looks and feels like on a mundane day-to-day basis. And the text gives us this deeply relatable backstory from Emma.
It is so relatable.
She was a teacher, spending every single day helping students, just giving her energy to everyone in her immediate radius. And she makes a point to note that from the outside, the facade was perfect.
Right. No cracks in the armor.
None. Things looked totally fine. But internally, she uses this specific phrase. She says she was running on empty.
Running on empty, yeah.
Every day had become a carbon copy of the last, and she realized she had completely stopped doing anything for herself. And here is where she hits the trap that I think so many of us fall into.
The big leap trap.
Exactly. She believed that the only way to cure this deep structural exhaustion was through a massive, earth-shattering change. She thought she needed a new job, a new city like an entirely blank slate.
Which is such a common reaction, right?
Yeah.
But we have to look at the underlying psychology of that specific assumption.
Let's unpack that.
Why do we instantly equate the desire for internal peace with the necessity for external upheaval?
That's a great question. Why does she assume she has to flee her entire existence to find a version of herself that feels alive?
Well, it comes down to a self-protective mechanism in the brain. Waiting for a big leap operates as a highly effective subconscious excuse to avoid taking any action in the present moment.
Wait, let me make sure I'm mapping this correctly. Are you saying the fantasy of the grand escape is basically a psychological shield?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, because if I convince myself that I need to move to a cabin in the woods or, quit my corporate job to truly be happy, I don't have to feel guilty about scrolling on my phone for 3 hours tonight because, well, I'm not in the cabin yet.
Right.
The massive scale of the required change justifies my current paralysis.
That is perfectly stated. Think about the resources required for a massive change.
Oh, they're huge.
Right. Moving to a new city or blowing up your career requires immense financial runway, perfect timing, and a tolerance for massive risk.
Which an exhausted person does not have.
Precisely. Because the barrier to entry for those changes is practically insurmountable for a deeply depleted person. It provides the perfect, socially acceptable alibi.
Wow, an alibi.
You tell yourself, well, I can't afford to move to Paris today, and I can't responsibly quit my job tomorrow, so I have no choice but to continue suffering exactly as I am.
That is so dark, but so true.
The grand fantasy doesn't liberate you, it traps you. It protects you from having to face the terrifying, mundane, and entirely achievable small steps that are actually within your control right now.
That really reframes the entire concept of feeling stuck. It's like realizing your commute is miserable.
Okay, yeah.
And convincing yourself the only solution is to buy a brand new luxury car. You spend all your time researching new cars, stressing about the cost of new cars, when the material reality is that you just haven't changed the oil in your current car for 5 years.
Yes. Oh, I love that analogy.
You don't need a new engine. You need basic, fundamental, unglamorous maintenance. But dreaming about the shiny new car successfully distracts you from the grinding metal under your own hood.
The dealership fantasy masking the deferred maintenance. That captures Emma's initial state perfectly.
Right.
And what is so vital in the source text is how that fantasy is ultimately broken. The disruption doesn't come from a dramatic life event.
No, she doesn't get fired.
She doesn't win the lottery. The disruption comes from a profoundly quiet, solitary moment of self-confrontation.
The catalyst. And it happens on a totally ordinary evening. The text describes her cleaning her desk after class, just doing mundane chores, and she stumbles upon an old university notebook.
Such a cinematic little moment.
It really is. And inside this notebook, she finds a graveyard of forgotten dreams, places she wanted to travel, books she intended to write, languages she planned to learn.
All the things that made her.
Yeah. And the text says she sat there reading those old entries, realizing how much of herself she had quietly set aside.
That phrase.
That phrase is haunting. Quietly set aside. Because it implies there was no grand battle where she gave up her dreams, right? She just slowly, silently placed them in a drawer to make room for the demands of other people.
And in behavioral psychology, we look at moments like this through the lens of cognitive dissonance.
Okay, let's define that practically for the listener.
Sure. Cognitive dissonance is essentially the deep, uncomfortable mental friction you experience when your current reality, your daily actions, completely clashes with the core beliefs you hold about who you are or who you're supposed to be.
So a clash between reality and identity.
Exactly. Emma didn't discover any new information in that notebook. It wasn't a revelation delivered from the outside world. She was confronted with the physical, handwritten evidence of her own abandoned aspirations.
She basically ambushed herself.
She did.
She met her past self on a random Tuesday, and her past self looked around at her exhausted, depleted life and asked, "What happened to us?"
And that resulting friction is non-negotiable if you want to alter your trajectory.
Really, non-negotiable.
Absolutely. The gaping void between the vibrant person who wrote in that notebook and the depleted teacher holding it created a psychological crisis. In the mechanics of human behavior, that friction is the only thing that sparks actual change.
Without the friction, we just stay comfortable.
Well, we stay stuck. If you don't experience that uncomfortable realization, you will simply continue to coast on the empty tank, letting the momentum of your obligations carry you forward until the engine seizes completely. The notebook provided the necessary friction. It forced her to look at the unchanged oil.
Okay, but recognizing that you are running on empty and experiencing that friction, that is really only the diagnostic phase, right?
Right, it's step one.
The critical question for the listener is, how do you actually bridge that massive gap without upending your life? If moving to Paris isn't the answer, what is?
The answer is remarkably small.
Yeah, the source text offers a mechanism that is almost shockingly simple, but it requires a massive internal pivot.
It is the deliberate shift from the macro fantasy of escape to the micro reality of daily practice.
So Emma decides to make one single, highly specific decision. She commits to giving herself exactly 1 hour each evening.
Just 1 hour.
That's the boundary, just for her. No grading papers, no answering emails, no fulfilling expectations for anyone else.
Which is harder than it sounds.
Oh, way harder. The stated agenda for this hour is simply learning, reflecting, and creating. But the transcript notes a crucial detail about this transition. Emma admits it felt incredibly strange at first.
Right.
She was so deeply conditioned to giving her energy away that the act of receiving her own attention felt completely alien.
We need to analyze the specific difficulty of transitioning from a giver to a receiver when the recipient is yourself.
Yes, let's get into that.
This is perhaps the most profound psychological hurdle mentioned in the text. It defies basic logic on the surface. If you are exhausted, shouldn't resting and dedicating time to your own interests feel instantly euphoric?
You would think so. If you're starving, eating a meal feels great. If you're exhausted, an hour of free time should feel like a massive relief. Why does it feel strange or even uncomfortable for her?
Because of the underlying reward loops we build our lives around.
Reward loops.
Yes. When Emma spent her day helping her students, the external validation was immediate and tangible. She received a smile, a thank you, or a visible improvement in the student's performance.
Ah.
That external feedback triggers an immediate release of dopamine. She feels needed, valuable, and validated in her role. The reward loop is external, and it is very fast.
So she's basically addicted to the feeling of being useful to others.
Exactly. But dedicating an hour entirely to yourself. There is no audience. There is no immediate applause.
Wow. I see the mechanics of that. When she helps a student, the world tells her she has value. When she sits alone with a notebook, the room is completely silent.
Silent and empty.
And if you have been actively avoiding your own internal reality for years, sitting alone with your thoughts isn't relaxing, it's deafening. It strips away the busyness that you've been using to mask your exhaustion.
Taking that hour is not a spa treatment. It is a radical reclamation of psychological territory.
The reclamation, I love that.
It forces you to sit with the discomfort of your own unmet needs. And the text traces the organic progression of this practice. Emma didn't demand greatness from that initial hour. She didn't expect to write a novel in the first week.
Right, there wasn't a productivity goal attached to it.
Exactly. The hour was just a protected container. But because the protection was consistent, the text notes it slowly led to reading more deeply, practicing her writing, and eventually the creation of the early versions of the very podcast this transcript comes from.
A massive, life-altering outcome was generated entirely from a microscopic, fiercely protected space.
It proves the concept.
It does. But I understand the progression. I have to pause here, though, and push back a little bit on behalf of the listener.
Quickly, devil's advocate.
Because setting aside 1 hour every single evening sounds wonderful in the abstract.
Sure.
But let's look at the reality of the person listening to this deep dive right now. If someone is working a grueling shift, coming home to parent toddlers, or managing the care of aging family members, an hour of totally uninterrupted, expectation-free time might literally feel like an impossible luxury.
It might feel like a fantasy.
Yeah. Sounds like climbing Mount Everest in flip-flops.
Does the source material offer any kind of lifeline for someone whose reality simply does not allow for a pristine 60-minute daily retreat? It does, thankfully. And it anticipates that exact resistance. John and Emma go out of their way to clarify that the 1-hour metric is not a rigid, punitive prescription.
Oh, good.
The text provides a deep level of reassurance on this point. They state explicitly that the time doesn't have to be perfect, it doesn't have to be uninterrupted, and it certainly doesn't even have to be a full hour.
So what are the alternatives?
The alternatives they suggest are deeply accessible. A short 5-minute morning routine, listening to a free online class during a commute, or simply jotting down 3 sentences in a journal before falling asleep.
So the volume of the time, the actual minutes on the clock, is not the active ingredient in this transformation.
Not at all. The duration is entirely secondary. The active ingredient is the psychological shift occurring beneath the action.
What kind of shift?
The text states that these small, consistent acts build something highly specific. They build self-trust.
Self-trust.
Yes.
Yes.
It is the ultimate realization that, as the text directly quotes, I can count on me.
I can count on me. Man, that is the actual currency being minted in these moments, isn't it?
It absolutely is.
It's not about mastering a new language in an hour. It's about casting a tiny, undeniable vote for your own existence.
A vote for your own existence. That's a powerful way to put it.
Well, think about it. If you constantly break promises to yourself, like if you tell yourself you'll read a book tonight, but then you spend the evening doing your coworker's unfinished project, you teach your subconscious that you are at the absolute bottom of the priority list.
You do. You train yourself to be last.
You learn to deeply distrust yourself. And rebuilding that trust doesn't require a 60-minute meditation retreat. It requires a 3-minute promise that is actually kept.
Exactly. When you make a tiny promise, say, I will drink 1 glass of water and look out the window for 60 seconds before checking my email, and you execute that promise, you are proving to your nervous system that you are a reliable caretaker of your own inner life.
A reliable caretaker.
Yes. You demonstrate that you are worthy of your own protection.
Let's follow the trajectory of that self-trust then. Because once you begin generating it internally, it inevitably bleeds out into your external reality, right?
It has to. It changes your posture.
Right. And the moment your internal growth becomes visible, it immediately collides with societal expectations.
Oh, boy.
Society has this obsession with putting a ticking clock on when we are allowed to grow or reinvent ourselves.
The societal timeline. It is basically an invisible expiration date stamped onto human potential.
The source text highlights this collision with a really vivid anecdote from John. He talks about a 60-year-old man who decides he wants to learn a new language.
Right, I remember this part.
And crucially, he's not doing it for a promotion at work. He's not relocating to a foreign country. He's doing it purely to challenge his own mind.
Which is a beautiful reason.
It is. And what is the reaction from his community? The text says the people around him laughed. They literally told him to his face that it was too late.
We really need to deconstruct the psychology of that laughter. Why do people find late-stage self-investment amusing?
It's so weird when you think about it.
Why is the immediate instinct to enforce the societal timeline and discourage someone who is simply trying to expand their vocabulary?
Honestly, it's a profound cruelty disguised as casual banter. Why would anyone care if a 60-year-old man wants to buy some flashcards?
Exactly. Why does it bother them?
My theory is that it isn't actually about him at all. It's a defense mechanism. If I have quietly given up on my own dreams, if I have accepted that my life is permanently fixed in its current shape, and suddenly my neighbor starts learning a new language at 60, his ambition is incredibly threatening to my complacency.
You've identified the exact mechanism. Witnessing someone else's unprompted growth forces you to confront your own stagnation.
Oh, man.
When the people around this man laughed, they were not mocking his linguistic abilities. They were actively defending their own inertia.
Defending their inertia. Wow.
They were projecting their deep-seated insecurities onto his effort. If society agrees that it is too late for him, then it is safely too late for them, which means they are officially off the hook.
They don't have to try.
Right. They don't have to do the hard, uncomfortable work of growing. His active pursuit of knowledge is a mirror reflecting their passive surrender.
So their laughter is just armor. It protects them from the friction we talked about earlier.
Precisely.
But the text gives us the ultimate vindication for this man. John notes that 5 years later, this same man is traveling confidently, conversing with locals in this new language.
5 years later, that consistency.
Yes. And the text makes a beautiful observation. He is smiling because he proved something important. Not to the people who laughed at him, he doesn't care about them anymore, but he proved something to himself.
Which brings us directly back to the currency of self-trust. He validated his own initial promise.
He sure did.
John and Emma summarize this narrative arc with what might be the defining quote of the entire source text. They say, "Growth doesn't care about age, background, or where you start. It only cares that you start."
It only cares that you start. I love the personification of growth there.
It's brilliant.
It frames growth not as a harsh judge demanding perfection, but as this incredibly patient, universally accessible force. It is just standing there waiting for you to step up to the starting line, entirely indifferent to how many decades it took you to find the track.
The text also points out a profound secondary consequence to stepping up to that starting line. It introduces the ripple effect of internal investment.
Let's talk about the ripple effect.
John explicitly states that when you start investing in yourself, even if you do it in complete silence, the external world actually begins to shift around you.
Yes, I want to zero in on the exact phrasing from the text here. John says, people will treat you differently because you treat yourself differently. Opportunities will notice you because you've built the courage to notice yourself first.
It's a bold claim.
It is. Let's look at the mechanics of that. Because on the surface, it sounds a bit like, manifesting or magic. How does reading a book in your room alone for an hour translate into opportunities noticing you in the real world?
It isn't magic. It is behavioral signaling.
Behavioral signaling.
Yes. When you build internal self-trust, your physical and verbal posture in the world fundamentally changes. The boundaries you set become firmer. The way you speak about your own time carries more weight.
So you stop being a pushover.
Basically. If you have spent an hour investing in your own mind, you stop constantly apologizing for taking up space in a meeting.
So when a coworker tries to dump their crisis onto your desk at 4:55 p.m., you don't instantly shrink and absorb their panic.
No, you don't.
You pause, you hold eye contact, you say, I can look at this tomorrow morning.
Right.
It's those micro expressions, the slight delays in your response, the lack of an immediate apology that subconsciously signal to the other person, this person values their own time, which means I must value it too.
Exactly. The external world is highly attuned to subtle social and behavioral cues. You are constantly training the world how to treat you based on the standards you establish.
Training the world.
By treating yourself with respect in the dark, you naturally exude a standard of respect in the light. You change the rules of engagement.
So we've explored the necessity of the pivot, the currency of self-trust, and the ripple effect it creates. But if this new mindset is a tangible space we are actively constructing, what does it actually look like?
This is where the text gets really poetic.
It does. The source material transitions here into a vivid, multi-layered architectural metaphor. John and Emma suggest that we need to stop thinking of our minds as a storage drive and start thinking of ourselves as a home.
It serves as the master metaphor for the entire transcript. It takes all of these abstract psychological concepts, trust, boundaries, learning, and anchors them into something tactile and spatial.
Let's walk through the front door of this concept and take it apart. The text says, think of yourself as a home, not the kind made of bricks, but one built from thoughts, emotions, and habits. Every single act of self-investment adds a small, solid piece to that home.
It's a beautiful image.
I want to meticulously deconstruct the architecture they lay out, examining every single room. Let's start with the perimeter. The text states, the books you read become the windows that let light in.
We have to ask why they chose the imagery of windows. Why not doors, or walls, or a roof?
Good point.
A mind that only ever consumes its own thoughts, that never seeks outside input, is functionally a sealed room. Over time, a sealed room becomes dark, stale, and completely isolated from reality. Your own anxieties echo off the walls and amplify.
That sounds like a prison, honestly.
It is. By likening books or podcasts or any form of external learning to windows, the text emphasizes elimination and perspective.
Because a window allows you to see that there is a world outside of your immediate local panic. If you are burned out, your perspective narrows until the only thing you can see is your exhaustion.
Tunnel vision.
Exactly. Reading provides view into other eras, other minds, other struggles. It lets the external light of human experience shine on your internal space. It breaks the claustrophobia of the empty tank.
It ventilates the mind. And moving inward from the windows, the text addresses the floorboards. It says, the lessons you learn become the foundation that holds you steady.
Okay, notice the specific phrasing here. They do not say the successes you achieve are the foundation.
That is a huge distinction. A foundation poured from the concrete of mistakes rather than the gold of success.
Yeah, why is that so important?
Because lessons are almost exclusively born from failure, from struggle, and from the moments when things completely fall apart.
That's true. You don't learn much when everything goes right.
Right. If your psychological foundation is built entirely on a winning streak, on getting the promotion, receiving praise, having everything go according to plan, it is actually incredibly brittle.
Brittle.
Yes. The very first earthquake of real adversity will shatter it because you have no experience in how to withstand structural stress.
Oh, man. But if your foundation is built on lessons learned, if it is built on the knowledge of how to survive a public failure, how to adapt when you lose a job, how to endure the embarrassment of being wrong, that provides true structural integrity. A foundation made of lessons means that when the external world gets chaotic, your internal home doesn't collapse. You know you can survive it because you've survived the pouring of the concrete.
Which brings us to the interior design of the space, Emma says. The quiet moments you spend reflecting become the soft furniture where your mind can rest.
I want to linger on this specific image, soft furniture.
It's so evocative, isn't it?
It is, because when you are trapped in that initial state of burnout, your internal landscape is brutal. Your mind is basically sitting on a folding metal chair in a sterile room under fluorescent lights.
Oh, that is a bleak picture.
But it's true. It's stark, it's uncomfortable, and it's purely utilitarian. You only go inward to criticize yourself or to furiously calculate your next task.
It is an internal environment designed entirely for harsh functionality, not for habitation.
But the mind requires a comfortable place to rest, not just a desk to work at. Those quiet moments of reflection we talked about earlier, the journaling, the 5 minutes of breathing, that is the act of dragging a velvet armchair into the center of your consciousness and granting yourself permission to simply sit down.
A velvet armchair. I love that.
It is the profound acknowledgement that you are allowed to be comfortable inside your own head. You don't have to be productive every second you are awake.
And this brings us to the ultimate function of constructing this home. The text makes a deliberate, highly realistic pivot here. It stresses that this inner home is not just a fair weather retreat.
Right. It isn't a pristine, untouched museum where nothing ever goes wrong.
Emma openly acknowledges the reality of suffering.
She does. She says, when life feels too heavy, that's okay. Every home has days like that.
This is a vital guardrail for the listener. The goal of self-investment, according to the source material, is not the attainment of perfection.
It's not about being invincible.
No, it is not about reaching a state of enlightenment where you never have a negative thought, or never feel exhausted by your kids, or never fail at your job again. The goal is creating a shelter.
A sanctuary.
Exactly. When the storm inevitably hits outside, the inner home is the place you retreat to. You don't retreat there to punish yourself for getting wet. You retreat there to remind yourself that you are still learning and that you are inherently worthy of safety.
It's the difference between being caught in a freezing thunderstorm in an open field versus watching that exact same thunderstorm from a comfortable chair next to a sturdy window.
That's a perfect way to visualize it.
The storm is identical. The chaos of life is still happening. But your relationship to the storm has completely transformed because you have built a shelter.
You are no longer at the total mercy of external conditions. But, and this is a big but, as anyone who has ever owned or rented a home knows, a physical structure does not maintain itself.
Oh, definitely not.
A shelter requires continuous, deliberate upkeep.
You can't just build the foundation, install the windows, and walk away expecting it to last forever. So how do we keep the metaphorical roof from leaking?
We need a maintenance plan.
Right. How does the text suggest we maintain this inner shelter when the initial burst of motivation fades? Because motivation always fades.
Always.
The hosts lay out what is essentially a 3-part maintenance manual for the human psyche. The 3 pillars are awareness, discipline, and gratitude. Let's start with the first one, awareness.
John defines awareness in a highly operational way. It is in the vague spiritual concept.
How does he define it?
He says it's about actively noticing the texture of your thoughts. And when your mind inevitably begins to criticize you, you pause and apply a singular filter. You ask, would I talk this way to someone I love?
Applying that question to your own inner monologue is a sobering exercise.
It really is.
I mean, if I actually spoke to my friends the way I speak to myself when I make a mistake at work, I wouldn't have any friends left. I would be considered an abusive person.
It exposes the profound hypocrisy of our internal critic. We often deploy a level of cruelty, impatience, and harshness toward ourselves that we would find morally reprehensible if directed at a child or a partner.
Morally reprehensible, that is so accurate.
By forcing yourself to ask that question, you force the conscious mind to recognize the hostility of the subconscious. And the text offers an immediate corrective action. If not, soften the words. Speak to yourself like someone you want to protect, not punish.
Protect, not punish.
Awareness in this architectural metaphor is the act of standing as a security guard at the front door of your own home, refusing entry to abusive thoughts, even when those thoughts are wearing your own face.
You have to evict the tyrant.
Exactly.
Which tees up the second pillar of maintenance perfectly. Discipline. And here's where I think the text does its most radical heavy lifting. It completely re-engineers the definition of the word.
It really does.
Emma says, add discipline, not as pressure, but as devotion. Discipline is how you keep your home warm.
We have to unpack the societal baggage attached to the word discipline. Culturally, discipline is viewed almost entirely as a mechanism of punishment.
Yeah, it's a very harsh word.
It is the whip we crack over our own backs to force productivity out of a tired body. It is deeply associated with denial, pain, strict conformity, and a fundamental rejection of our own comfort.
Right. The modern definition of discipline is like waking up at 4 a.m. to run 10 miles in the freezing rain because you hate the way you look in the mirror.
Exactly. It's rooted in an adversarial relationship with yourself. You are the drill sergeant, and you are also the exhausted recruit.
It is entirely combative, but the text frames discipline as devotion. It strips away the combat and replaces it with profound care.
Care instead of combat.
Yeah. Demotion is choosing to keep the small promises to yourself, even when you are tired. It was the act of sitting down to read when your brain wants to numb out on a screen, or having the courage to say no to an invitation that will leave you drained.
It changes the entire flavor of the action.
It does. I was trying to map this reframing, and it struck me that discipline as devotion is exactly like the difference in how you might feed a child.
Oh, tell me more about that.
Well, you can force a child to eat a plate of steamed vegetables by yelling, "Eat this because I said so," and if you don't, you're grounded.
Right, authoritarian.
Or you can spend an hour cooking them a deeply nourishing, healthy meal because you look at them and desperately want them to grow up strong, healthy, and immune to illness.
Okay, I see where you're going.
The physical action, the child eating the vegetables, is identical in both scenarios, but the energy fueling the action is entirely different. One is tyranny, the other is love in action.
That is a phenomenal analogy.
True discipline isn't about being your own dictator. It's about stepping up as your own devoted caretaker. It's waking up early not to punish your body, but to fetch the firewood required to keep your inner home warm.
That distinction is the key to longevity. Tyranny relies entirely on fear and force, and those are highly combustible, unsustainable fuel sources. Eventually, the exhausted recruit will rebel against the drill sergeant.
You'll just quit.
You will burn out on your own forced discipline. But devotion relies on love and self-respect, which is a renewable energy source. When discipline is practiced as devotion, the daily maintenance of the shelter no longer feels like a chore. It feels like an act of preservation.
And that leads to the third and final pillar of the maintenance manual, gratitude.
The decorations.
Yes, the text says, don't forget to decorate your home with gratitude. I love how they carry the metaphor all the way to the finish line. Gratitude is the aesthetic layer. It turns ordinary, unglamorous days into tangible reminders of progress.
It shifts your focus.
John suggests you literally look around your life, observe your internal state, and whisper the phrase, "I built this piece."
Consider the psychological weight of claiming total ownership over your own peace of mind.
It's massive.
We are deeply conditioned to attribute our peace to external, uncontrollable factors. We say, I'll be peaceful when this massive project is finally done, or I'll be peaceful when the kids are asleep, or I'll be peaceful when I get that raise.
We outsource our equilibrium.
Exactly. By whispering, "I built this peace," you are reclaiming your agency. You are recognizing that the momentary calm you feel is not a lucky accident of the universe granting you a good day. It is the direct, undeniable result of your own quiet, persistent, microscopic acts of self-investment.
You stacked the bricks. You poured the foundation.
You did the work.
So if we take a step back and look at the entire structure, if we combine the awareness required to protect the home, the discipline as devotion required to maintain the warmth, and the gratitude required to decorate the space, what is the ultimate psychological result?
What happens to the person living inside?
Yeah, what happens to the person living inside the structure?
The conclusion the text draws offers an incredibly stabilizing perspective. Emma states that when you engage in this continuous process, you fundamentally alter your relationship with your own struggles.
How so?
You recognize that when you fail or when you feel exhausted, you aren't lost. You aren't a broken machine. You are simply, as she beautifully phrases it, under construction. Beautifully, patiently, intentionally.
Under construction. Man, that phrase changes everything.
It really reframes the mess.
It implies that the mess is an inherent, necessary part of the process, rather than proof of your defeat. If you walk past a construction site, you don't look at the exposed wires, the dirt, and the scaffolding and say, wow, what a ruined, broken building.
Right, you know it's not finished.
You understand that it is a future masterpiece that is currently in a state of transition. Applying that grace to yourself allows you to endure the messy phases of your own growth without concluding that you are a failure.
It shifts your entire worldview from a state of permanent ruin to a state of active, intentional progress.
So we have dissected the text, we have unpacked the metaphors, but what does this all mean for you?
The listener.
You, the individual listening to our voices right now, navigating your own deeply complicated, demanding, and beautiful life. We want to bring this deep dive to a close by speaking directly to your immediate reality.
Let's bring it home.
We want to borrow the exact call to action that Emma and John offered to their listeners in the source text.
The very first thing you need to recognize is that the mere act of you listening to this analysis, the fact that you took an hour of your day to think critically about your own internal architecture and the state of your own mental tank, is already a profound act of self-investment.
It is.
You're not waiting at the starting line anymore. You have already started.
You're already laying the bricks. You've already pulled the velvet chair into the room. But we don't want you to stop with just listening. We want you to execute a micro step.
Just one tiny step.
Let's be very clear. We are not asking you to overhaul your entire life by tomorrow morning. We are not telling you to hand in your resignation, book a flight to Paris, or learn a new language by next week.
Returning to the core wisdom of the text, you do not need to rush. You simply need to stay. You need to remain in the room with yourself.
We are prompting you to choose just one incredibly small, almost laughably simple act for tomorrow. Maybe it is finding a notebook you haven't opened in years and writing 3 honest sentences about how you actually feel.
Or maybe it is applying the filter of awareness.
Yeah.
Consciously choosing to speak kindly to yourself the next time you drop the ball at work.
Or maybe it is just walking out your front door for 5 minutes to breathe the outside air and reminding yourself that your identity exists independently of your obligations to other people.
The scale of the action is entirely irrelevant. The devotion fueling the action is what ultimately builds the shelter.
And as you take whatever tiny step you choose, I want to explicitly echo the most grounding, reassuring phrase from the entire source text.
This is one to remember.
It's a phrase that, frankly, deserves to be written on the mirror of every person who feels like they are running out of time. The text says, remember, you are not behind, you are becoming.
It is a profound semantic distinction. To believe you are behind implies that life is a standardized race and that you are actively losing it.
Which is just not true.
Becoming acknowledges that you are engaged in a unique, unfolding process governed entirely by its own sovereign, unhurried timeline.
And so we leave you with this final lingering thought. We've spent this entire hour analyzing the concept of your mind as a house.
A house built of habits.
We've explored how your daily thoughts, your habits, and your tiny promises are the raw materials, the lumber and the bricks of the structure. It is a powerful, heavy way to look at the reality of your daily life.
It definitely changes your perspective.
So I ask you to look at the thoughts you've had today, the way you spoke to yourself this morning, the habits you engaged in. If your mind is a home that you have to live in forever, and every single thought you have is a brick, what kind of room are you building for yourself right now?